Hi, welcome back. My name is Attila Börös. This is already the 12th lesson in our solar energy course. As you see, we already covered the two-thirds of the solar topics. In the first few chapters, we learned about the sun, the sunlight, its effects, the history of using the solar energy. We also saw how can we convert solar energy to heat energy, and my colleague was talking about how can we convert solar energy into electricity. We spent 3 chapters for the different solar cells technologies. And last time, we evaluated the advantages and disadvantages of using solar energy. In this topic, we will see the different possibilities cleverly using the solar energy in the architecture. It is self-evident when the sun is shining, that is daylight, and in case of direct sunshine, one can feel the heat as well. So it can be used quite easily for lighting in wide applications, but with proper building planning and choosing appropriate building material, the sunshine can be used effectively for temperature control and for ventilation as well. So in this video, I will talk about the applications using the solar energy for heating, lighting, and also for cooling. The pursuit of use of solar energy is not new. It was self-evident even in the ancient times that this free energy can be utilized. The ancient Greek planned the whole cities in Greece to allow every all-over access to sunlight during winter to one-term homes. As you see on the map, by running the streets in checkerboard pattern, running east-west and north-south pattern, every home could face south, permitting the winter sun to flow into the house throughout the day. The Romans developed further the system. Their houses became much more hotter in winter than similarly oriented Greek homes because the Romans covered their window spaces with mica or glass, while the Greeks did not. Using the energy of the sun is basically a good thing, but when the sun is not shining, there are not too much to do with solar energy. Let's see the factors influencing the amount, the time, and intensity of sunshine. These things have to be already known from previous chapters. One of the main factors is the angle of incidence. The higher is it, the more is the incoming energy. As you see, it is dependent on the geographical position, season, and the topography. But let's imagine a nice summer day on a slight southern slope. The angle of incidence is perfect, but now imagine it an overcast situation, and the perfect situation is ruined because the light transmittance of the air is reduced. And for planning a building where the usage of solar energy is a goal, the vegetation has to be considered too. Huge evergreen trees on the southern side of the building are not helping this endeavor. But why do we want to use the solar energy in architecture? Because letting natural light into the building has lots of benefits. Because a healthy lifestyle is very important nowadays, and that requires fresh air and sunshine. The sunshine has healthy wavelengths for humans, and with proper planning, it can help the adequate airing in the building. Apart from these advantages, it can be used for lighting and also utilized for achieved temperature comfort. On this slide, you can see the 2 ways how the solar energy can be utilized in architecture. The one way is actively using it. In this case, special solar equipment is used to convert solar energy to heat energy and electricity. These include the use of mechanical equipment like photovoltaic cells, solar thermal collectors, or pumps, and fans to trap the solar energy. The other way is the passive solar technology. It converts solar energy to heat energy without the use of active mechanical systems. It is mainly the practice of using windows, building placement, and other simple techniques to capture or deflect the sun for use. Both systems has its advantages and limitations. The best way is to combine them, planning the house according the passive way, and in top using some active devices in the best for the nature and for the budget too. But let's see them separately. First, let's see the active systems. I will not talk about it too much because we spent plenty of time about the active devices. In the previous videos, we saw the solar panels and solar collectors, and I always illustrated with pictures how they can fit into the building design. Active design means some greenhouse gases emission, such as CO2, and can be expensive, and more equipment are needed for installation. On the other hand, if one installs panels to avoid obstructions and blocking elements, it can be very effective. With good sense, designing panels into building design can be aesthetic as well. Do you remember the color panels? With the always improving efficiency and design and the multitude of the panels, integrating them into the architecture is almost limitless. Only the expenses and imagination sets the limit. The next way is the passive way. Because we know already a lot about the active way, in this chapter we will evaluate this method in detail. Passive solar energy is an excellent idea to heat, cool, and lighten the living area. Passive solar energy is used to distribute heat or cool through wide selection of building materials and based on the structure of our buildings without active elements. As you see the listing, there are plenty of passive systems, like skylights, storefront, south-facing glass, light scopes, and clerestory for note-rooms, solar walls such as trombe, masonry, stone, along with glass layer and airspace. Some spaces such as greenhouses, verandas, and glazed areas on south. We need the sunshine, especially winter time. So winter heat gain is very desirable. There are some design considerations one should take into account. The sunshine on the north hemisphere is coming from south, therefore maximum glazing on south, less on east and west, and minimal on north is desirable. Also orient home to face the equator with a slight west orientation for atmosphere heat lag. Design home for long dimensions in east-west direction, shallow dimension in north-south direction, so heat is distributed better toward the full depth. The building's south face should receive sunlight between the hours of 9 am to 3 pm, sometime during the heating season. Interior spaces requiring the most light and heating and cooling should be along the south face of the building. Less used spaces should be located on the north. An open floor plan optimizes passive system operation. Using thermal mass to store excess solar energy during the winter day, which is then radiated during the night. Now let's see the passive solar gain summertime. Installing deciduous trees and shading devices on the south side for shading helps control air movement and cooling. Designing overhangs and other shading devices helps to block steep sun rays from late spring to early fall. Let's see how can architecture influence thermal comfort. It is very difficult to define. The best that you can realistically hope to achieve is a thermal environment which satisfies the majority of people in the workplace, or, put more simply, reasonable comfort. The main factors determining thermal comfort are the air temperature, radiant temperature, air velocity, and humidity. Below left, you can see what mainly restate normal conditions. Optimum air temperature range 20 to 24 Celsius, optimum humidity range 40 to 60%, optimum air movement is 0.1 to 0.5 meter per second, naturally ventilated rooms, and 0.1 to 0.2 meter per second in air-conditioned rooms. How to reach the desired thermal comfort? The first step is, as you see, the 3 stages of passive solar design is to collect the heat. The different collector types do this job. The period of time we need the heat does not coincide with the time when it is collected. Mostly the collection is during daytime, but we need the heat at night as well. So we have to store it somehow. This can be difficult, but there are some possibilities for it, like tromble walls, water, or concrete stores. After storage in desired period of time, the heat has to be released. Now, we will discuss this in more detail. The 5 elements of passive solar design are aperture, collector, absorber, thermal mass, distribution, and control. The first one is the aperture or collector. This is a large glass area through which sunlight enters the building. The apertures should face within 30 degrees of true south and should not be shaded by other buildings or trees from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. daily during the heating season. The next is the absorber, the hard darkened surface on the storage element. The surface, which could be a masonry wall, floor, or water container, sits in the direct path of sunlight. Sunlight hitting the surface is absorbed as heat. Then, let's see the thermal mass. Materials that retain or store the heat produced by sunlight. While the absorber is an exposed surface, the thermal mass is the material below and behind this surface. A few words about the control. Roof overhangs can be used to shade the aperture during summer months. Other elements that control under and or overheating include electronic sensing devices, such as a differential thermostat that signals a fan to turn on, operator vents, and dampers will allow or restrict heat flow, low emissivity blinds and awnings, or actually simply a digital tree. We know already the goal of the passive solar heating systems. It is to capture the sun heat within the building material and release that heat during periods when the sun is not shining. We know the main elements of the system, and now let's see the 3 main methods of passive solar heating. These are the direct gain, the indirect gain, and isolated gain. Direct gain method is the simplest method, where the actual living space is a solar collector, heat absorber, and distribution system in one. South-facing glass admits solar energy into the house, where it strikes masonry floors and walls, which absorb and store the solar heat. Then it is radiated back out into the room at night. These thermal mass materials are typically dark in color in order to absorb as much heat as possible. For indirect gain, sunlight is often received by a south-facing wall, and as air moves into internal space, the heat moves through the living room. In direct gain, thermal mass is located between the sun and the living space. The thermal mass absorbs the sunlight that strikes it and transforms it to the living space by convection. The indirect gain system will utilize 30 to 45% of the sun's energy striking the glass adjoining the thermal mass. The most common indirect gain system is a Tromber wall. The third method is the isolated gain method, which contains solar collection and thermal storage that are separated from the actual living space. A good example is when we built a winter garden in connection with the house. Or, as you see on the picture, in rural Kabul, they use this system for temperature control in the houses. Storing the energy is always the bottleneck in the system. The big breakthrough in the usage of the solar system will happen when the batteries will be much more efficient. In a passive solar system, thermal mass is a substance that absorbs heat, stores it, and later releases it. Actually, it is a battery. In the winter, when the sun is allowed to shine on them, they can be charged up to help to warm the house by transferring the sun's heat inside. And when the surrounding outside air temperature drops, as the air cools after the sun has gone down, the thermal mass will continue to release its stored heat energy. When all the heat is discharged, it is ready to once again charge up or absorb heat again. Thermal mass is measured in terms of volumetric heat capacity. Thermal mass properties of some material are presented in a table below. I mentioned already the thermal walls. They can be categorized into three types: Trombe wall, those utilizing a massing wall to store heat; water wall, those utilizing a water to store heat; and transwall, those utilizing water for storage along with transparent absorber to facilitate visual comfort. By Trombe wall, the thermal mass is a 6 to 18-inch thick masonry wall is located immediately behind south-facing glass of single or double layer, which is mounted a few centimeters in front of the wall's surface. Solar heat is absorbed by the wall's dark-colored outside surface and stored in the wall's mass, where it radiates into the living space. Solar heat migrates through the wall, reaching its rear surface in the late afternoon or early evening. When the indoor temperature falls below that of a wall's surface, heat is radiated into the room. Water walls are thermal storage walls that use containers of water placed directly behind the aperture glazing as the thermal storage medium. The advantage over Trombe or other masonry walls is that water has volumetric heat capacity about twice that of the high-density concrete. It is therefore possible to achieve the same heat capacity using half the space. After finishing the first part of the chapter, it is time for a short quiz. Let's try to answer the next questions. First, what are the 5 elements of passive solar design? Do you remember? They are aperture or collector, the absorber, thermal mass, distribution, and control. The next question is, What are natural light is mostly used in agriculture for? It is used for lighting and for thermal controlling. Till now, we were talking about thermal regulation, but we know already that solar energy can be utilized in other ways. For example, for lighting. Daylighting is the controlled admission of natural light, direct sunlight, and diffuse skylight into a building to reduce electric lighting and saving energy. Daylit environments increase occupant productivity and comfort and provide the mental and visual stimulation necessary to regulate human circadian rhythm. On this slide, you can see what considerations to consider when designing sunlight lighting. We will talk about them in detail. First of all, orient the majority of the glazing north-south with secondary glazing to the west if necessary. Use a proper building plan for. Determine the required glazing ratio. Illuminate the ceiling as much as possible. Protect against direct sunlight and balance light from the window wall with reflected daylight on the opposite wall. One of the most important is the building orientation. For best result, orient the majority of the glazing north-south with a maximum exposure to more easily controllable daylight. South is desirable because direct solar radiation received by the south facade is easier to control to prevent excess solar gain. North light is also good for daylighting because it is not direct but constant soft and diffuse skylight. Toward the east and west, the sun is very low, almost horizontal, so it is hard to control. The next is the building form. Maximize perimeter to daylight. Long and narrow footprints are better than square ones for access to daylight. Buildings can be arranged as a series of wings to minimize land requirements while still allowing access to daylight. The space between the wings should be not too narrow that they shade one another. The glazing ratio and window height is important to consider, because the higher the glazing ratio, the more light can enter the room, but the greater the heat effect of the sun. Triple glazing, tinted or reflective glass will reduce daylighting, but will increase thermal comfort. Optimum glazing ratio depends upon the user requirements, building orientation, location, view of the sky. As a general rule, the higher the window heat height, the deeper into the space the daylight can penetrate. For these reasons, good daylighting practice dictates that the window should ideally consist of two separate parts, daylight window and lookout window, which you will see on the next slide. Illuminating the ceiling as much as possible is a good practice, especially when the ceiling is flat and wide. Like this, the room will be much more lighted. As you see, clerestory windows should locate as high as possible on the wall to illuminate the ceiling and grab the maximum amount of daylight. This system can be further improved with a kind of mirror. The light shelf is an extremely useful to reflect light falling above the vision window up to the ceiling. The building should be protected against direct sunlight, but the daylight should enter as much as possible. Daylight and sunlight are two terms that should not be confused. Daylight is described as the diffuse light of the overcast sky, similar on orientations, bright above and dark at the horizon. It is soft and cool of both temperature and color. Sunlight is warmer and stronger, and in excess will overheat the building. Therefore, one should use different methods to prevent it. There are shading devices, but the trees are also really useful. In winter, it lets light into the building without its canopy, but in summer, when the light would be too strong, it provides shade. Now we will see some overhead daylighting systems. They are very useful for lighting the darker parts of the back of the house. Skylights can be either passive or active. The majority of skylights are passive because they have a clear or diffusing medium, usually acrylic, that simply allows the daylight to penetrate an opening in the roof. They are often comprised of a double layer of material for increased insulation. They can be of any shapes. You can see on the slide some details about sizing and placement. The number on the right bottom corner, the 23.5 degree. This should be already familiar. The polar axis of the Earth is inclined by an angle of 23.5 degrees to the plane of the Earth's orbit. With this in mind, the window can be designed to let in most of the light. On this slide, you can see a popular and useful system. The tubular daylight devices are another type of top lighting device. These systems employ a highly reflective film on the interior of a tube to channel light from a lens at the roof to a lens at the ceiling plane. Tubular daylight devices tend to be much smaller than a typical skylight, yet still deliver sufficient daylight for the purpose of dimming the electric lighting. Finally, we will talk about the solar cooling in architecture. One of the most ancient building forms, which is designed for using the solar cooling system, is the courtyard design. Summertime, the thick outer walls and roof keep spaces cool, and sun heats the courtyard for a short time. The building convection currents keep cool air pockets in smaller rooms. During the day, as courtyard heats up, the cool air is drawn from the rooms to the courtyard, creating cooling breeze effect. At night, heat from the courtyard roofs, stone floors cause reverse convection, drawing heated air to the back rooms. Wintertime, the process is reversed. The heat is left in rooms by shuttering the windows and openings to retain the heat. On the next three slides, the different modern techniques for cooling can be seen. Here, you can see the slanted ceiling and ventilation windows. How it is worked. The interior walls and floors, which are concrete, will absorb heat of the sun and release it later. This means warm air will rise and follow the slanted ceiling, and the warm state air would escape through the ventilation windows. This will stimulate the passive ventilation in the building and create an assisted movement of the air. Cooler air will now flow in front of the bottom, creating a constant flow of cooler fresh air during summer. On the other picture, you can see the outer design of a given house. The pergola of the western side of the dwelling will act as a screen for the late afternoon sun. In summer, it will be very hot, and the pergola would assist by keeping the patio cool. The screen wall to the far right will also assist with shading. At the same time, it will act as a windscreen for the patio. On the same principle that warm air rises, there are some designed for cooling. Above left, you can see the system which was invented for style cooling, but it helps not only for animals, but in residential buildings as well. In the other corner, you can see an already known design, where the skylight is combined with vents. Here, the warm air can escape, creating a vacuum, so the cool air close to the bottom will enter into the room. On this slide, you can see one of the best methods. Here, a greenhouse or a winter garden is attached to the house, which makes the home much more beautiful. Apart from this, it helps in the thermal control, and the green plants cleans the air and producing oxygen as a byproduct. Let's see the cooling effect. The greenhouse space thermal mass elements are cooled at night. Windows are opened to absorb the cool at night. During the day, as the heat rises in the space, vents at upper levels are opened to remove the heat. This also induces the cooler airflow with opening lower vents or windows, pulling the cool air through the home to the green space. The greenhouse space will work with water, mass, concrete, tile or stone elements and pull cool air from the north shaded deck and underbuilding cooler air. After finishing this topic, let's answer this question regarding lighting. What are the important factors affecting lighting? They are building orientation, building plan form, glazing ratio and window height, interior color, and shading. Today, we were talking about the possibilities using the solar energy in architecture. Of course, there are more designs and still more will emerge. In the next topic, we will proceed with some simple design you can do it yourself. This makes fun and possibly reducing the electric bill. Thanks for watching. Bye.